In this video, I will explore about @defer block introduced in Angular 17. Using @defer block, we can lazily load a part of code in our HTML template so that we can improve the loading time of the page. Within the defer block, we can write those components that takes time or means heavy component. So let us understand it. Write @defer and in this block you need to write those components, load those components that are heavy or takes time. Other sub blocks are there: @placeholder, @loading, @error. What will happen that @defer will trigger on different conditions. We will discuss it later. And till the time defer block has not been triggered, the placeholder content will be shown. Okay, and once the defer block has been triggered, we can show an image or some content that the deferred content is being loaded. And if there is an error while loading the deferred content, we can show an error using @error block. So these are the sub blocks. These are the optional to use: @placeholder, @loading, @error. These are the optionals. So let us understand what are the triggers to trigger the defer block. For the demo purpose, I have created a component, item report component, and in this component I have just created an input box and a button, and the component name is selector is item component. So in the defer block I am writing this component and I will defer it. Okay, and rest of the code can be anything. Okay, now let us understand the triggers. The first trigger is idle. The idle trigger loads the content when browser state is idle. This is default. We can use it as on idle, suppose like this, on idle. It means when the browser state is idle. The deferred block item component will be loaded when the browser state is idle. Okay. And this is the default trigger. So what we can do is that it is not necessary to use. We can write code like this. So by default, deferred block is triggered when the browser state is idle. Now let's see other trigger. Viewport. The viewport trigger loads the deferred content when that content enters the viewport. The viewport represents an area that is currently being viewed. The content that is watched to enter the viewport can be one of the following: placeholder, content with a single root element, or use a template reference variable in the same template. Pass this variable as a parameter on the viewport trigger. So what happens that if we use viewport trigger, we need to use @placeholder, or we can use a template reference variable, otherwise it will give error. So let's use the viewport on viewport. Okay, and the content that is watched to enter the viewport, this will be the placeholder. Okay, and if you don't want to use the placeholder, we can use a template reference variable. Suppose, and inside this we can write our message. First of all, I will show you that if you don't use placeholder, there will be an error. Viewport trigger with no parameter can only be placed on the default that has placeholder block. So it is necessary to use. Now, if you don't want to use, what we can do is that just pass this template reference variable to the viewport and it will work. So to use the viewport trigger, we have to use either the placeholder or we can use this message, this template reference variable. Now let's see other trigger. In the same way, interaction trigger. The interaction trigger loads the deferred content when we click or press key down on the specified element. Interaction element can be at the placeholder block with single root element or a template reference variable. Same thing. Okay. So the interaction trigger loads the deferred content when we click. We can use it. Interaction. So suppose I will click item component placeholder, and once we click on it, then the deferred content is loaded. Look at here. Okay. Next, one more thing important, that within the placeholder we have to write the content that has a root element. Other triggers are hover. The hover trigger loads the deferred content when the mouse has hovered over the interaction element. Let's see. We will hover the mouse over the message shown in the placeholder, and then deferred content will be loaded. The immediate trigger loads the deferred content just after all other non-deferred content has finished rendering. Okay. Timer. The timer trigger loads the deferred content after the specified duration. Okay, let's try it. On timer, and we give a time. Suppose 2 seconds, 2000 millisecond. After 2 seconds, it will automatically load. See, okay, it will trigger automatically after 2 seconds. Another trigger is when. With the when, we can give a condition. Let's see how. Suppose I have an observable I am creating a variable and then use when trigger with the message with the condition okay, data dollar is here. Once it returns the success message, then we will get this the value of data dollar in MSG, and I am checking if MSG is success only when this deferred block will be loaded. Okay, in this way we can use when trigger. Now let us see how to use the prefetch. What we can do that once the deferred block is started to load, and what we can do that the associated JavaScript can be loaded before the deferred content is being loaded. In this way, when the deferred content will start to load, it will be faster. Okay, so the associated JavaScript we are loading on idle trigger and the content on the interaction. Let us see. So prefetch will load only the associated JavaScript of the content inside the defer block, and the content will be shown only when the defer block is triggered. This is here interaction. So what will happen that associated JavaScript will be loaded once the browser state is idle, and the item component will be shown when we interact with the message shown in the placeholder. Okay,